Camilla still remembers the way Emily stood there, arms crossed, chin lifted, with that familiar blend of entitlement and contempt, a look that had followed Camilla since childhood, but had never cut quite this deeply. It wasn't the words alone that shattered the air. It was the pleasure behind them. "If you can't handle me spending weekends with your husband," Emily said slowly, savoring every syllable, "then go to hell." No one shouted, no one gasped, no one even blinked. Ryan kept chopping vegetables with the same relaxed rhythm, like he'd heard it all before, like it didn't violate the most basic laws of loyalty. A strange silence wrapped around Camilla's ribs, not painful, not sharp, just final. She waited for something, anything from him. A glance, a wince, a sign that he saw the cruelty for what it was. Instead, he kept smiling down at the cutting board as if Emily were doing nothing more than sharing a harmless joke. Camilla's pulse slowed. Her breath steadied. Something inside her didn't break, it slipped free. Emily smirked as she turned away. "I'm not responsible for your insecurities," she added, her voice a casual blade. Those weren't just words. They were a door slamming shut. And without knowing it, Emily had opened another. Camilla stayed still long enough to feel the room shift around her, like she had stepped out of her own life and was watching strangers reenact a scene she didn't remember agreeing to. The kitchen lights felt too bright, the air too warm, the distance between her and Ryan wider than the Pacific she had refused to cross for him. She swallowed once slow, steady, then stepped back from the threshold of the conversation she was never meant to win. The tile floor felt colder under her feet than she expected. It grounded her as she moved away from the kitchen, her fingers grazing the wall, not for balance, just to confirm she was still capable of feeling something other than resignation. In the hallway's dim light, the words replayed again and again. Not because they hurt, but because they were true in a way Emily didn't intend. If Camilla couldn't handle it, if she couldn't handle the lies, the secrets, the quiet mockery she'd let them get away with for far too long, then maybe she didn't belong here anymore. Maybe she wasn't meant to. 8 feet from the kitchen, Camilla paused. Ryan laughed at something Emily said. That laugh didn't belong to a man holding on to his marriage. It belonged to someone entertained, indulged, and utterly comfortable with the damage he was helping create. Camilla closed her eyes. A different version of herself might have confronted them, demanded an explanation, pleaded for honesty. But that version of herself had been dying for months now, starved by excuses she'd forced herself to believe, suffocated by the weight of being the reasonable one, the forgiving one, the steady one. When she opened her eyes, she wasn't any of those women anymore. She walked straight to her office at the end of the hall. The quiet hum of her servers greeted her like an old friend, one that had never lied, never betrayed, never twisted truth into knots that only hurt her. This room lined with screens, code, and data had always made sense in ways human relationships rarely did. She sat, pressed a key, and watched the monitors blink awake. The system immediately displayed a banner, unreviewed flagged events, 43. 43. She stared at the number, feeling neither shock nor anger, only confirmation. Evidence was waiting. Answers were waiting. The truth had been waiting for her long before she was ready to see it. She leaned back in the chair, letting the tension roll out of her shoulders. The glow from the monitors illuminated the room with a cool, soft blue light, the kind that always helped her think clearly. She clicked the first file, a motion log from the kitchen, Emily entering the home at 7:22 p.m. On a Wednesday, when Camilla had been working at the firm downtown. Emily shouldn't have had a key. Emily shouldn't have been there at all. And yet there she was, smiling at her own reflection in the microwave door as she brushed her hair back. Camilla clicked the next file. Emily again, letting herself in at noon on a Saturday. Ryan walked in behind her, not surprised, not startled, comfortable. The air in the room cooled around Camilla. Her heartbeat stayed even. She had been suspicious. She hadn't been prepared for the pattern. She opened audio archive. The first recording crackled, then played softly through the speakers. Emily's laughter, high, bright, practiced. Ryan's voice followed. She won't question anything he said. Camilla trusts too easily. Emily hummed. Maybe she shouldn't. Camilla didn't flinch. She only listened. Every word stitched itself into a tapestry she had been too tired to examine until now. She clicked through more logs. A private zone being activated in the kitchen. User R. Hale. She replayed the timestamp 4 times, but the result didn't change. Ryan had deliberately disabled part of her home surveillance, a feature he shouldn't have known how to manipulate. But Emily knew how to watch her. And Ryan knew how to hide from her. Camilla's hands rested calmly on the desk. She wasn't afraid of the truth anymore. She was only marveling at how loudly it spoke once she stopped muting it. Her phone buzzed on the desk, a reminder from Helix Cyber Global. The email subject line glowed softly. Leadership role, Singapore. Final confirmation needed. The job she'd turned down twice. Once because Ryan said a stable home matters more than ambition. Once because Emily cried and begged, saying, "I need you here, I can't lose you too." Camilla clicked the email open. The offer still stood. The deadline hadn't moved. The universe, unlike Ryan or Emily, didn't gaslight. It repeated its message. She stared at her reflection in the darkened corner of the screen. A woman who had built entire security frameworks from nothing. A woman who solved complex threats for a living, but had ignored the simplest one in her home. A woman who had outgrown this house, these people, and the version of herself who kept shrinking to keep everyone else comfortable. She whispered into the quiet room, "Show me everything." The system responded instantly, loading logs, timelines, audio files, anomalies, pieces of a puzzle she finally felt ready to solve. She scanned the timeline again. Something new flashed, a device connection at 3:17 a.m. Guest network, unknown user, not Emily, not Ryan, not any device she recognized. Her breath hitched for 1 second, only one. Someone else had been watching, someone not in this house, someone not tied to the petty games of jealousy and entitlement Emily played. Someone else. But that mystery could wait. What couldn't wait was the clarity blooming inside her chest. A clarity that felt like oxygen after months of breathing underwater. She walked back to the bedroom and watched Emily and Ryan through the crack in the door. They were laughing about something. Something small, something meaningless, something that used to make Camilla feel like the outsider in her own marriage. Now it made her feel nothing at all. She closed the door quietly. Then she opened her closet, reached for the hard-shell suitcase she hadn't touched in years, and placed it gently on the bed. Her hands didn't shake. Her heart didn't race. In the silence of her bedroom, she finally understood she didn't need to confront them. She didn't need to expose them. She didn't need to make anyone understand the truth, because the truth already existed. And she was done living in a life that didn't. Outside the door, Emily laughed again, bright and victorious. Ryan joined her. Camilla zipped the suitcase halfway, paused, and looked up at the ceiling, letting the moment settle into her bones. "I'm not going to hell," she whispered. "I'm going to Singapore." And for the first time in a very long time, she felt like she had somewhere worth going. Camilla woke before dawn, long before either of them would stir, long before the house would adopt its usual rhythm of footsteps, clattering dishes and the soft hum of normalcy that always seemed to mock her for feeling out of place inside her own life. The sky outside was still a deep, muted blue, a color that made her think of quiet decisions and irreversible choices. She lay there for a moment listening, not for danger, not for betrayal, just for confirmation that the silence she felt inside herself was still real. Emily's voice the night before replayed in her mind, not with sharp edges but with a startling level of clarity. "If you can't handle me spending weekends with your husband, then go to hell." The way she'd said it, so casual, so entitled, felt like the final sentence in a chapter Camilla should have ended a long time ago. She sat up, stretched her fingers, once then stood and walked toward the living room. The hardwood floor felt cool beneath her feet. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't need to. Her home was mapped in her mind the way her security systems were. Every corner, every wire, every blind spot she had intentionally left, not physically but emotionally. The first light of morning bled through the blinds when she entered the kitchen. The quiet was almost peaceful. She opened the fridge not because she was hungry, but because she needed a task to anchor her. She reached for a water bottle, and as she did, she noticed a faint perfume lingering in the air, not hers. Not anything she ever bought. And strangely, not the scent Emily typically drowned herself in either. Something else, something unfamiliar. She closed the fridge door, inhaled slowly, and let the unease settle. A lesser version of herself might have brushed it off, but she wasn't that version anymore. Camilla turned toward the hallway just in time to hear Ryan coming down the stairs. His footsteps were slow, groggy, unbothered. When he walked into the kitchen, he didn't look surprised to see her awake. He looked relieved. "Morning," he said, gently rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he sensed she was upset but didn't want to deal with it. Camilla offered a polite nod. Nothing more. Ryan stepped closer. Too close. He reached out to touch her arm, then seemed to think better of it. "About last night," he began. "Emily didn't mean it. You know how she gets when she's stressed." A small quiet laugh escaped Camilla, not from humor but from disbelief. She meant every word she replied calmly. Ryan blinked, taken aback by her tone. He wasn't used to this version of her, the one who didn't soften her words to protect his comfort. "You're overreacting," he said quickly. "You always think the worst." "No," Camilla said, looking him directly in the eyes. "I've spent years thinking the best of you. That's the problem." He opened his mouth to argue, but she walked past him. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just decisively, like someone stepping around a piece of furniture that no longer served a purpose. "Cam," he started. She didn't turn. "I'm going for a walk." The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint scent of morning dew and pine, one of the few things she still genuinely loved about this neighborhood. She followed the familiar path around the block, the one she'd walked countless times while thinking through system designs or debugging code in her mind. But today, she wasn't analyzing anything technical. She was analyzing herself. Where had she disappeared over the years? When had she learned to bend until she nearly broke? Why had she allowed Emily and Ryan to define her position in her own life? She walked faster, letting the cool air fill her lungs and flush her system clean. Neighbors smiled as she passed. She smiled back. They didn't know anything. They didn't see the cracks. They only saw Ryan the charming and Emily the captivating. They saw the story Emily had been carefully writing for years. A story where Camilla was always the background character. When she returned home, the sun was higher, casting warm light across the living room floor. Emily was awake now, sprawled casually on the couch with a mug of coffee in hand like she owned the place. She glanced up at Camilla with a smirk that didn't even attempt to disguise the dismissal beneath it. "Morning," Emily said, stretching lazily. "You look tired." Rough night, Camilla didn't take the bait. She walked past her and headed to her office, but Emily wasn't done. "You know," she called out, her tone dripping sugar, "if you're upset about last night, just say so. Don't do that silent martyr thing. It's annoying." Camilla paused at the doorway of her office and turned. "You insulted me," she said simply, "and you enjoyed it." "Don't be dramatic," Emily scoffed. "I was telling the truth. You're insecure about me and Ryan. That's not my fault." Camilla's jaw tightened. Not in anger, just in realization. Emily didn't even understand the damage she caused because she had never experienced accountability. Never needed to. There had always been someone, parents, friends, boyfriends, even Camilla, absorbing the impact for her. Not anymore. Ryan entered the room, pausing when he saw the tension. "What's going on?" Emily lifted her mug and shrugged. "Your wife is upset because I told her the truth." Ryan's expression hardened. "Emily, seriously—" "Oh, stop," she snapped. "You know she gets jealous. I'm just honest about it." Ryan looked at Camilla, expecting her to defend him, expecting her to say something self-deprecating to smooth things over. She didn't. "Actually," Camilla said softly, "I'm not jealous." Emily raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "I'm sure," Camilla replied, "because jealousy comes from wanting something you're afraid to lose. And I'm not afraid anymore." Emily's smirk faltered, just slightly. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "Camilla, can we just—" "No," she said, not unkindly. "We can't keep pretending nothing's wrong. You two may be comfortable with this dynamic, but I'm not." Emily rolled her eyes dramatically. "Here we go." Camilla looked between them, her gaze clear and steady. "I'm done shrinking myself to fit around your excuses." Then she walked into her office and closed the door behind her. Her heart wasn't racing. Her hands weren't shaking. She felt strangely anchored, as if finally saying the words she'd been swallowing for years had rooted her deeper into herself. She sat at her desk, turned on her monitors, and began reviewing the previous night's system alerts again. The number 43 glowed on the center screen. It was almost poetic how the truth waited patiently for her to be strong enough to receive it. She clicked through a few more motion logs, then paused when she reached a new notification: unauthorized network access attempt, 3:17 a.m. She opened the file. The screen filled with code, scrambled, interrupted, masked. Someone had tried to enter her network through the guest channel. Someone with skill. Someone who knew how to hide an entry point but didn't know she had created a forensic mode that captured shadow packets. It wasn't Emily, too sophisticated. It wasn't Ryan. He didn't know how to navigate her systems at all. Someone else. Someone she hadn't accounted for. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from awareness. This wasn't just a family conflict anymore. This wasn't just betrayal wrapped in jealousy and entitlement. There was something deeper, something she hadn't uncovered yet. She saved the log, encrypted it, and backed it up onto her private server. Then she pushed her chair back and stood. Her suitcase was still on the bed upstairs, unpacked, waiting. Not because she wasn't ready, but because she needed this morning to confirm that what she felt last night wasn't impulsive. It wasn't. The truth had ripened overnight. She left her office, walked upstairs, and stood before the suitcase again. She unzipped it fully this time, took a deep breath, and began placing clothes inside, deliberate, measured movements that felt nothing like running away. It felt like alignment, like stepping toward something instead of just escaping something else. As she folded the last blouse, she heard Ryan and Emily downstairs arguing. Their voices overlapped, accusation layered over excuse, emotion layered over manipulation. The same cycle she had spent years smoothing over. She didn't rush. She didn't hurry. She placed the blouse inside, zipped the suitcase, and set it upright. A new chapter didn't always begin with fireworks or collapse. Sometimes it began with a quiet closing of a zipper. Camilla rested her hand on the handle of the suitcase and whispered, "Finally." She wasn't leaving because of Emily. She wasn't leaving because of Ryan. She was leaving because she was finally ready to choose herself. And once she made that choice, nothing in that house felt like it had any claim on her anymore. Camilla closed the door to her office behind her and let the quiet settle over her like a second skin. It was the one room in the entire house that had never lied to her. Screens still glowed softly from where she'd left them earlier, waiting like loyal sentinels for her return. She stepped closer, her bare feet soundless against the rug, and lowered herself into the chair that had held her through countless nights of analysis, design, and problem-solving. But tonight, she wasn't here to solve a client's puzzle. She was here to solve her own. She tapped the keyboard once. All 6 monitors brightened, illuminating the room with a pale blue halo. A banner blinked immediately. Unreviewed flagged events, 43. Not a small number, not an accident, not a coincidence. Camilla inhaled slow and steady, then clicked the first file. The playback loaded instantly. A video feed from the kitchen, time-stamped nearly 3 weeks earlier. The angle showed the door swinging open at 7:22 p.m., and Emily stepping inside with a tote bag slung over her shoulder. Camilla had been at work during that time frame. She remembered that night she'd stayed late debugging a deployment error. Emily should not have been here. Neither she nor Ryan had said anything about plans. Emily brushed her hair back with a practiced flick of her wrist, then reached up to adjust the overhead light. She stood there for a moment, staring at her reflection in the microwave door, as though admiring herself. Then she disappeared from view. Camilla clicked the next file. Another entry. Another timestamp during hours Camilla had not been home. Emily again, this time entering with a container of fruit, smiling at something on her phone. She lingered in the kitchen as if waiting for someone. And then seconds later, Ryan walked in behind her, his jacket already half off. Ryan said something the system's mic didn't completely capture, but Emily laughed. The same laugh she had offered freely the night she told Camilla to go to hell. Camilla's face didn't change. She leaned forward, clicked again, and moved through the logs slowly, methodically, the same way she'd analyze breach attempts or anomaly patterns on client systems. Her heartbeat stayed even. Her breathing never spiked. Feeling didn't sharpen or dull, it simply stepped aside to let clarity through. She clicked into the microphone logs. Audio file number 12 began with soft static before Emily's voice cut cleanly through. "She won't question anything," Emily said. "Camilla thinks the best of everyone. It's adorable," Ryan responded. "It's her weakness. Weakness." The word didn't slice through Camilla. It didn't bruise. It simply landed inside her with a weight that felt familiar. Too familiar. She had always believed the best of them. She had always believed love, familial or romantic, deserved patience. That patience had cost her more than she ever named out loud. Her fingers moved without hesitation to open another file. Audio file, number 14. The conversation was clearer this time, as if they had spoken right into the kitchen mic. "Emily. She'll never walk away. Trust me, she needs us more than we need her." "Ryan, I know. That's why she'll stay even if she hates this." "Emily, good. Then we don't have to hide anything." Silence stretched for a moment, an intentional silence, Camilla realized. Then Emily whispered something too soft for the mic to catch. Ryan laughed. A short, low, familiar laugh. Camilla sat back slowly. Her spine relaxed against the chair. She wasn't surprised, not anymore. She wasn't hurt, she had run out of space for that. She wasn't even angry. What she felt was more like confirmation. The kind of confirmation she'd grown used to seeing in data patterns. When anomalies no longer hinted at a problem when they were the problem. She clicked to the next section, device behavior. Her home network map expanded across the largest monitor. Every device appeared: phones, laptops, assistants, smart home hubs. Most were labeled and familiar. 2 were not. Ryan's phone showed multiple instances of restricted sync patterns. Not unusual by itself, unless you knew that Camilla had once set up an automatic sync for him to help keep their schedules aligned. He'd disabled it during the same windows Emily had been in the house. And then there was the guest network entry at 3:17 a.m. An unknown device had connected briefly, then vanished. The MAC address was masked. Not an amateur trick, not something Emily would know how to do, not something Ryan could ever execute even accidentally. Camilla's hand hovered for a moment over the mouse. Then she pulled up the Advanced Analysis HUD. Shadow packets, partial traces, echo traffic. There it was. Someone else had been in her network. Someone with skill. Someone who wasn't part of this house and yet knew exactly when to slip into it. She bookmarked the file. She wasn't ready to unravel that knot yet. First, she needed to finish the one directly in front of her. She switched back to the camera archives. The next file was labeled Private Zone Activation. Kitchen. User R. Hale. She clicked. The footage was blank for 8 minutes. Just static, intentional static before the feed resumed. That more than anything else felt like a hand closing over her shoulder from behind. Not because of the betrayal it represented, but because of the intent. Ryan had disabled the cameras in a place he knew she rarely inspected, which meant he had gone into her system, which also meant Emily had taught him, or someone had taught both of them. The realization didn't shake her. It centered her. She reached for the mug beside her keyboard, discovered it empty, and set it aside without thought. Then she clicked into a file marked Clip, Living Room, Week 27. The footage loaded after a short delay. Emily sat on the couch, her leg crossed over Ryan's, scrolling through a presentation on her laptop. She leaned in to whisper something. Ryan smiled. She adjusted his collar. He didn't pull away. But the part that hollowed the air was what came next. Emily looked up straight at the camera, straight at the lens, straight at the device she shouldn't have known about. And she smiled, slow, inevitable. Then she lifted one hand and tapped something out of frame. The camera feed went black. Camilla didn't blink. She rewound it once, twice, 3 times. Same movement, same certainty, same knowledge Emily should not possess. She closed the clip, took a breath, let it go. Not the betrayal, not the evidence, just the emotional thread that once bound her to the idea that she should care. That part slipped off her shoulders like a coat she didn't need anymore. She pushed back from the desk and walked toward the window. Morning light filtered through the blinds, warm and golden, washing over her hands. Outside, the world looked unchanged. Neighbors would soon walk dogs. Schools would open their doors. People would drink coffee and check emails and make choices they wouldn't think twice about. But for Camilla, the world had already shifted. She wasn't the woman who absorbed other people's behavior as if it were her responsibility to make it easier. She wasn't the sister who made excuses for Emily's cruelty. She wasn't the wife who tucked away her own needs so Ryan wouldn't feel threatened. She was the one who finally saw the truth and refused to look away from it. She turned back to the desk and pressed a single key. Export all evidence. Her system began collecting the last 90 days of camera feeds, microphone logs, access attempts, and behavioral anomalies into a clean, irrefutable package. Progress bars filled slowly, steadily, as though gathering the pieces of a puzzle she'd been assembling unconsciously for months. Camilla crossed her arms and leaned against the wall watching the data compile. She wasn't doing it for revenge. She wasn't doing it to expose them. She was doing it because truth deserved to be witnessed, even if she no longer intended to stay long enough to confront anyone with it. The final file completed. A soft chime echoed through the room. Camilla stepped forward, saved the package onto an encrypted drive, and closed the system. And then she whispered to herself, not in sadness, not in fear, but in clarity. I'm not leaving because they lied. I'm leaving because I'm finally done pretending I don't see it. Her decision didn't feel heavy. It felt merciful. She turned off the lights, letting the monitors fade one by one, their glow dissolving back into darkness. The truth no longer needed to shine here. She had already seen enough to walk away. Camilla clicked on the next audio file and rested her fingertips lightly on the desk, steadying herself. Not because she feared what she was about to hear, but because she wanted to feel the truth fully, without flinching, without granting it the power to wound. The speakers crackled softly before Emily's voice spilled into the room, high and confident and dripping with the brand of arrogance she'd sharpened since childhood. I mean seriously, Emily said with a laugh. Camilla makes everything so clinical. It's like talking to a spreadsheet. A chorus of giggles followed voices she didn't recognize, friends Emily had collected for validation rather than companionship. Another voice chimed in. But she's so smart. Isn't that good? Emily scoffed. Smart isn't the same as warm. She's just robotic. And Ryan needs someone who understands actual human emotion. Camilla blinked once, slow and detached. Robotic. She'd been called worse, though rarely by someone who owed their entire stability in life to her endless patience. She clicked to the next file. This time it was just Emily and Ryan. They were sitting close. She could hear the faint rustle of fabric, the clink of a mug being set on the table. Emily's voice softened, dripping with false sympathy. You know she's never going to give you what you need. Ryan sighed heavily. I know. I've tried. She just doesn't get it. Something inside Camilla shifted. Not bitterness, not grief. Recognition. This wasn't new. It was simply the first time she'd let herself hear what was always there. Emily continued, You deserve someone present. Someone who looks at you, not at a screen. She's always in her own world, Ryan murmured. I feel like an accessory. An accessory. She almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because they had no idea how precisely they were describing themselves, not her. Camilla skipped forward. Another file. Another timestamp. This one began with a whisper. Emily, just imagine if she moved to Singapore. You and I could actually spend weekends together without sneaking around. Ryan. She won't go. She's too committed. Emily, no. She's too scared. Ryan hummed in agreement. Yeah, she's always been afraid to leave things behind. That was the moment Camilla felt something inside her chest unclench. She understood finally and fully why they'd been so comfortable. They weren't just betraying her. They were depending on her selflessness, counting on it, building their entire selfish comfort around it. She clicked another file. The microphone picked up Emily's voice again, but this time there was no laughter, just a low, venomous whisper. You want the truth, Emily said to someone, likely one of her friends. I could run circles around her emotionally. She works with computers all day. She doesn't get people. Ryan needs someone who knows how to love. Camilla's pulse didn't change. Her breath didn't catch. What she felt instead was clarity so profound it bordered on relief. She leaned back in her chair and let the words wash over her like cold water, cleansing and strangely invigorating. She pressed play on the next file. The audio was fuzzy at first, then sharpened. Ryan, if this ever blows up, Emily, it won't. She trusts you too much. Ryan, still, if it does, I'll just say she's obsessed with work. Everyone already thinks that. Emily laughed. Exactly. You'll look like the victim. Victim. Camilla stilled her hand, hovering above the mouse. So that was the plan. Not just betrayal, but narrative building, reputation shaping, preemptive victimhood. The realization didn't hurt. It freed her. They had never been afraid of losing her. They had been afraid of losing the version of her who absorbed all consequences. She clicked again. The next file was different, quieter, more intimate, as though they'd stepped closer to the microphone without realizing it. Emily. Do you think she suspects anything, Ryan? No. She's loyal? Too loyal. Emily, good. Just keep it that way. Camilla exhaled through her nose, not a sigh, a release. She clicked the next message archive. Text bubbles filled the screen, familiar formatting, unfamiliar content. Message thread. Emily and Ryan. Emily. She's at work. You still coming by, Ryan? Yeah, 15 minutes. Emily. Don't be weird this time, Ryan. You're the one who freaked out last week. Emily. That was only because she almost saw us leaving together. Ryan, relax. She sees what she wants to see. Camilla closed her eyes for a moment. Not because she needed to block anything out, but because she was absorbing a truth she had spent too long avoiding. She hadn't been blind. She had been loyal. And loyalty had been used as a shield for their cowardice. She opened another thread. Message thread. Emily and friend. Isn't this dangerous, Emily, only if she grows a backbone? Friend. You're playing with fire. Emily. She's too logical to lose control. She won't do anything dramatic. Camilla almost smiled. Dramatic wasn't her style, but decisive that she could do. She clicked another archive. Message thread. Ryan and colleague. Ryan, Camilla is brilliant, but she's cold. Colleague. You sure she seems dedicated? Ryan, dedicated to work. Not to us, not to making a family. Colleague. You chose her. Ryan, yeah. And I'm choosing better now. Choosing better. Camilla leaned her elbows onto the desk and laced her fingers together, letting that phrase sit there like a stray puzzle piece she'd finally found a place for. Not painful, just revealing. She clicked the final audio file. It began mid-conversation. Emily. She makes me feel small. Ryan. That's not her fault. Emily, doesn't matter. I don't want to be around someone who reminds me of what I'm not. Ryan. You don't have to be. We'll figure something out. Emily, I want him to pick me, she whispered. I want to win. There it was. The root, not love, not desire, not even need, competition, jealousy, winning. Emily didn't want Ryan because she loved him. Emily wanted him because taking him from Camilla made her feel powerful, validated. Camilla stopped the file and let the silence rise in its place. She looked around her office, the servers, the cables, the blinking indicators, the silent architecture of logic and truth she had built with her own hands. This room had always reflected her. Honest, direct, intelligent, underestimated. She pressed her palm to the desk, grounding herself. She finally understood the full story. She wasn't losing anything. She was shedding something. She stood and crossed to the small window overlooking the street. Dawn had fully broken light spreading over the trees, the houses, the sidewalks, the kind of light that made everything look sharper, including her decision. She turned back toward the monitors and issued a final command: export all evidence, extended range, 90 days. The system began processing the entire backlog audio-video logs texts into one synchronized master file. She watched progress bars fill like slow-burning fuses, lighting up the truth. She didn't plan to use the data against them. She didn't plan to confront them. Truth didn't need to be weaponized. It only needed to be recognized. When the final file finished compiling, she saved it to a secure drive, encrypted it with a key only she knew then shut the entire system down. One by one, the screens went dark until the room held only her reflection in the window. A woman no longer confused. A woman no longer shrinking. A woman who could walk away because she finally knew she deserved to. She stepped out of her office, closed the door softly, and whispered to herself, "This isn't heartbreak. It's clarity." And clarity, she realized, was the beginning of freedom. The house was still dim when Camilla stepped into the hallway, suitcase half-packed upstairs, evidence archived in her office, and a silence settling over her like a second heartbeat. She hadn't slept. She hadn't needed to. Some decisions didn't drain a person, they clarified them. As she descended the stairs, she saw Emily in the kitchen, hips leaned against the counter like she owned the place. Ryan stood beside her, pouring coffee for them both. Their casual intimacy was almost laughable now. Emily reached out and straightened the collar on his shirt, and Ryan didn't even flinch. They looked like a pair rehearsing for an audience that didn't realize the show was already over. Camilla lingered at the bottom step just long enough to observe, not mourn, not ache, simply witness the truth as it breathed freely in the open. Emily caught sight of her and lifted her mug in a mock toast. "Morning, you're up early, big day, or just couldn't sleep?" Ryan glanced at Camilla, eyes flicking with brief guilt before smoothing over. "You want coffee?" "No," Camilla said. Her voice was calm, collected, peaceful in a way that made Emily narrow her eyes suspiciously. Camilla didn't owe either of them an explanation, and for the first time in years, she didn't attempt to offer one. She walked past them toward the living room to retrieve her charger. Her steps were slow, not out of hesitation, but because she was memorizing nothing. She wanted no last impressions of this house, no lingering emotions that could tether themselves to her. Behind her, she heard Emily huff. "She's sulking again." Ryan murmured something low, some excuse maybe, or perhaps just another attempt to avoid conflict. It didn't matter anymore. Camilla reached the edge of the living room and paused. A memory flickered the night she moved in, the way she'd believed this home would be a foundation for the dreams she'd built with Ryan. She let that memory drift away as easily as exhaling air. Not everything deserved a permanent place in her heart. She turned and went upstairs. In the bedroom, her suitcase waited. She opened the closet and began pulling out what she truly wanted to take. Not much. A few blouses she actually liked, the soft sweater her mother had given her, her laptop charger, a worn paperback she had read at least 6 times. She left the gifts from Ryan untouched. She left the matching mugs Emily had insisted on buying her. She left the framed photos of fake smiles and perfect holidays. Everything that belonged to them stayed with them. Everything that belonged to her fit neatly into one suitcase. As she folded the last item, her fingertips brushed against a scarf tucked into the corner of a drawer. Pale cream soft wool, the scarf Emily had gifted her just because last winter. It had a tear along the seam that Camilla hadn't noticed before. A perfect metaphor. She dropped it back into the drawer and closed it without ceremony. She zipped her suitcase closed halfway and stepped away for a moment, letting the symbolism settle. She was not running. She was not hiding. She was simply finishing something that had been ending for a long time. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Helix Cyber Global Final Confirmation. Singapore. She opened it, read it, sighed. Then she pressed accept. No hesitation, no wait, no apology. The moment she did, something inside her shifted so profoundly it was almost physical, like a locked door finally swinging open in her chest. She moved through the room with a quiet certainty that felt new. She unplugged her devices from the smart home system, deleted her user profiles, revoked Ryan's emergency access permissions. She wiped her presence clean from the home, not out of spite, but because she didn't intend to be part of this structure anymore. When she stepped back into the hallway, the house felt hollow, but not like loss, more like a shed skin. She headed downstairs again, suitcase wheels rolling softly behind her. As she reached the bottom, she heard Emily's voice rising in frustration. "I'm just saying, Ryan, if she has a problem with us working together, that's her insecurity, not ours." I know, Ryan muttered. Emily scoffed. "Honestly, she should be thanking me. I make her look interesting." The words floated toward Camilla like a breeze that couldn't touch her. She stepped into the kitchen doorway, and both of them turned. Emily's phrase died halfway in her throat. "I'm heading out," Camilla said softly. Ryan frowned. "Where out?" Emily snorted. Wow, cryptic. Camilla didn't respond. Instead, she reached into the drawer, removed the spare house key, and placed it gently on the counter. It made a soft, metallic sound. That tiny sound shook Ryan more than any argument ever could. What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. Camilla didn't owe him an explanation, so she didn't give him one. She simply said, "Thank you for the clarity," and walked out of the kitchen. "No, hold on, Camilla," Ryan called after her, his voice cracking slightly. Emily whispered something, a sharp hiss of annoyance or panic Camilla couldn't tell. She didn't look back. She didn't need anything from their faces anymore. She reached the front door, opened it slowly, and paused on the threshold. It wasn't sentiment that stopped her. It was instinct. She sensed movement behind her, the kind of presence that didn't belong to someone who loved her or betrayed her. A different worry brushed the back of her mind, the same one that had whispered to her when she saw that unknown device accessing her network at 3:17 a.m. But when she scanned the street, nothing appeared out of place. Just morning light, the hum of a distant engine, the cool breeze of a new beginning. Still, her certainty deepened. Someone else was part of this story. Someone she hadn't yet seen fully. She stepped out and closed the door behind her. The latch didn't echo. It exhaled. She walked toward her car, suitcase wheels tapping along the path. Each tap felt like a heartbeat returning to its rightful owner. Inside the car, she took one last look at the house, not to reminisce, not to mourn, just to acknowledge the version of herself who had lived there. "I'm done," she whispered. Then she drove away, before Ryan even reached the front door. When she arrived at the airport, the early morning crowd was light. People hurried past with purpose, unaware they were sharing air with someone quietly changing the direction of her life. Camilla moved through security with the ease of someone who had rehearsed leaving in her mind for years. In the boarding area, she sat, hands folded loosely in her lap, watching planes rise into the sky, metal bodies, breaking gravity, choosing ascent. She wondered briefly when she had forgotten she could do that for herself. Another vibration buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at her phone. A system alert. Unauthorized access attempt. 3:17 a.m. pattern repeated. Origin unknown. Her pulse didn't quicken, but she paid attention. Someone had tried again, and whoever they were watching her movements too closely to be random. She saved the alert and tucked the phone away. Her flight was called. She stood, rolled her suitcase forward, stepped onto the jet bridge with a calm she felt all the way into her bones. As she found her seat and buckled in, she exhaled fully for the first time in months. Not a trembling breath, not a hesitant one, a clean one. The kind of breath a person takes when they understand they're not escaping. They're moving toward something. The plane taxied down the runway. Engines trembled. Lights flicked along the cabin ceiling. Then the aircraft surged forward, lifted, and severed its tie to the ground. Below her the city shrank, and with it the version of Camilla who had accepted less than she deserved. She didn't know what Singapore would hold, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't going to hell. She was going exactly where she chose. And that made all the difference. Camilla woke before her alarm, her mind already clear, her body already steady. The room was still dark, the air cool and unmoving, the kind of quiet that made decisions feel irreversible. She turned off the alarm before it could chirp, slipped out of bed, and moved through the room with slow, precise motions. Her suitcase stood near the door, zipped and ready, the quiet symbol of a life she no longer intended to negotiate with. She padded down the stairs, avoiding the creaky step out of habit, not fear, and stepped into the living room where the faint glow of streetlights seeped through the blinds. The silence felt heavier today, not oppressive, but expectant. She reached the front door, rested her hand on the deadbolt, and turned it. The moment she opened the door, a light snapped on behind her. She glanced up. The porch sensor light. Strange. She had turned that system off the night before. A tiny hum rippled down her spine, not panic, just awareness. Something had been altered, but she didn't linger on it. She stepped onto the porch, pulling her suitcase quietly behind her, and let the door close with a soft, final click. She didn't leave a note for explanation. She didn't need to. She had said everything that mattered when she placed the spare key on the counter yesterday morning. The air was sharp cold enough that her breath formed a faint, dissolving cloud. She inhaled deeply and walked toward her car. The wheels of her suitcase rolled smoothly across the concrete, each quiet rotation a heartbeat, marking distance from the life she was finally shedding. She loaded the suitcase into the trunk, then settled behind the wheel, gripping it lightly. Before starting the engine, she looked at the house one last time, not with longing, not with nostalgia. Just acknowledgement. She had survived many versions of herself within those walls. She wasn't taking any of them with her. The drive to the airport was quiet. Not a single call from Ryan or Emily, too early for their chaos to begin. The sun hadn't yet risen, and the sky carried that dim blue promise of change. Camilla let the hum of the engine comfort her. Every mile was a breath. Every turn was a release. At the airport, everything smelled of coffee and disinfectant. Rolling suitcases echoed across the polished floors. Travelers murmured to one another, unaware that she was quietly walking away from a life built on false promises and hollow loyalties. She checked in past security and found a seat near the gate. Her hands rested loosely in her lap. Her phone vibrated only once, an automated message from Helix confirming her flight arrangements in Singapore. She turned the screen face down. If Ryan or Emily called, she didn't intend to hear it. 30 minutes later, the plane boarded. As she stepped through the jet bridge, she felt the shift, not the dramatic cinematic kind, but the kind that settled deep in the bones. The kind of shift that meant she belonged to herself again. She took her seat by the window. The engines roared softly as the aircraft began to taxi. She placed her palm against the cool window as the airport lights blurred. Then the world fell away beneath her as the plane lifted, carried her higher, farther, freer. Somewhere over the ocean, her phone buzzed again, another alert from her system back home. Unauthorized access attempt. Denied. Same signature as the 3:17 a.m. breach. Not Ryan. Not Emily. Someone else. She logged the attempt into an off-grid folder and rested her head against the seat. She didn't need to solve that now. She closed her eyes as the clouds swallowed the world below her. By the time she landed in Singapore, the morning had already blossomed into heat. The airport was awash in warm light and the murmur of travelers moving with purpose. She stepped into the terminal and inhaled the dense, humid air. It wrapped around her like a welcome she had never known she needed. Her driver waited with a small placard displaying her name. He loaded her suitcase and whisked her into the city, weaving through streets bright with storefronts, blinking crosswalk signals, and early risers grabbing iced coffee from corner cafes. The apartment Helix had arranged for her sat high above the harbor. When she opened the door, sunlight poured across the vast living space, white walls, clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking water and steel. This place held no memories, no ghosts, no obligations. She walked through each room, touching nothing, absorbing everything. When she reached the balcony, she stepped outside and gripped the railing lightly. The city stretched outward in shimmering layers, pulsing with energy. She hadn't even unpacked, and already she felt more at home than she had in years. Later that afternoon, she arrived at the Helix Singapore office. A trainee at the front desk greeted her with genuine enthusiasm, not the polite disinterest she was used to back home. Colleagues shook her hand warmly. A senior engineer approached her with a smile so wide it almost startled her. "We've heard incredible things," he said. "We've been waiting for someone with your expertise." She nodded politely, though inside a quiet realization settled. She had spent years letting people convince her she was too much, too intense, too logical, too ambitious. And here those same traits were seen as strengths, not flaws. During her onboarding meeting, she opened her laptop. Immediately, a notification blinked at the corner of her screen. Security alert, attempted access from external source. She clicked it open. The metadata displayed a pattern that didn't match anything she'd seen Ryan or Emily capable of. The signature was clean, sophisticated, deliberate. Whoever this was, they were following her, not her house, not her network, her. She saved the alert into an encrypted folder and closed the window before anyone could see. Helix Singapore had no idea they'd inadvertently brought a cyber ghost into their sphere. She would deal with it later. Back in Portland, the storm began without her. Emily woke first, walking into the kitchen, expecting to find Camilla's quiet deference waiting for her, like some kind of daily offering. Instead, she found an empty room. The coffee maker untouched. No suitcase in the hallway. No note on the counter besides the key Camilla had left hours earlier. Emily's confusion quickly morphed into panic. Ryan stumbled into the kitchen moments later. "Where is she? Did she leave early?" "She's gone." Emily snapped, voice rising. "She really left." Ryan blinked in shock. She wouldn't just. Emily shoved the key toward him. She did. They tried calling her. Ryan first 5 times, then Emily 3. Every call went to voicemail. When that didn't work, they tried logging into the home system to see if she'd left any digital trail. But the system denied them both with a sharp beep and a cold message, "Access revoked." Ryan froze. "She locked us out." "Yes," Emily hissed. "And I can't even get into the cameras. There's nothing." She deleted everything. But Camilla hadn't deleted anything. She had simply reclaimed what was hers. While their panic rose like floodwater, Camilla stood on the balcony of her new apartment, letting the Singapore breeze wash over her skin. Cars hummed in the distance. Ships drifted across the harbor. Her life felt expansive again, wide and uncontainable. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown Singapore number. She lifted it slowly. The message read, "Where are you?" Camilla stared at the screen for a long moment. It wasn't from Ryan. It wasn't from Emily. The area code confirmed what her instincts already knew. This was someone here. She closed the message, locked her phone, and tightened her grip on the balcony railing. Not fearfully, not anxiously, simply aware. Someone was following the trail she had left behind. Someone who understood her systems well enough to slip into their shadows. Whoever they were, they had reached Singapore first. But Camilla had something now that she hadn't had in Portland space. Strength, a life she had chosen. She stepped back inside, shut the balcony door, and drew in a steady breath. She wasn't running anymore. She was stepping fully into the person she had always been meant to become. And if someone was watching, they were about to see a version of her they had never imagined. The glass doors of Helix Singapore slid open with a soft hiss as Camilla stepped inside, the cool white light washing over her like a quiet baptism. She paused for half a second, letting the hum of servers, the rhythmic clicking of keyboards and the faint scent of fresh coffee settle into her senses. For so long she'd worked in rooms where her brilliance felt like an inconvenience. Here, the air itself seemed to make space for her. "Ms. Hart," a voice called. Camilla turned to see Elaine Jo, sharp suit, sharper gaze approaching with a stride that radiated authority. "Welcome to Helix Asia," Elaine said, warmly extending a hand. "We've been following your work for years. We always knew you'd end up here." The sentence hit Camilla with unexpected force. Following her work, not her reputation, not her sacrifices, not the version of her Ryan and Emily always whispered about. Her work. Camilla nodded, accepting the handshake. "I'm glad to finally be here." "You'll meet your team shortly," Elaine said. "They've been eager." That word carried an extra weight. Eager, not skeptical. Eager, not threatened. Eager to learn from her. It was almost enough to make her chest tighten. As they walked through the corridor, screens displayed lines of code, live attack simulations, threat alerts, and global system dashboards. Every motion, every sound felt familiar, like she had stepped into a version of her life that fit. Elaine guided her into a large conference room. A dozen engineers stood, each one watching her with recognition she wasn't accustomed to. Admiration without envy. Respect without pretense. One young analyst, barely 25, handed her a small welcome card. "We're glad you're here," he said, voice sincere. "We've been needing someone who thinks like you do." Camilla allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you." They settled in as the meeting began. Within minutes, the team presented a complex regional security issue, an anomaly in cross-border data transfer logs. It was messy, layered, and tangled with outdated encryption protocols. Someone asked, "Any suggestions?" Camilla leaned forward, studied the screen for maybe 10 seconds, then pointed at a particular transfer line. "Your breach pattern isn't coming from the inbound logs," she said. "It's in the outbound confirmations. Someone is looping handshake protocols to disguise the exfiltration." Silence. Then a collective murmur of stunned realization. Elaine blinked. "That is exactly the flaw we missed." A ripple of impressed laughter moved through the team. Someone whispered, "She's brilliant." Someone else, "Finally." And in that moment, Camilla felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not vindication, but alignment. She was exactly where she was meant to be. After the briefing, Elaine pulled her aside. "Your predecessor left abruptly under strange circumstances. Some internal concerns were raised. If anything feels off, you tell me." Camilla tilted her head. Strange how Elaine hesitated. "Let's just say, unexpected departures aren't uncommon when people realize how powerful our systems really are." The words lodged somewhere deep inside Camilla, a quiet note of caution. She filed it away for later. Half a world away, Portland descended into chaos. Ryan sat in a small HR conference room, sweating through his shirt, as the head of compliance replayed footage from the Aspen retreat. His laughter with Emily, his casual mention of confidential client details, his flattery and excuses, it was all on display. "You violated multiple protocols," the HR representative said. "This is not a misunderstanding, it's misconduct." Ryan rubbed his forehead. "It wasn't like that. Emily pushed me to, so you allowed an unauthorized individual to influence your behavior during a corporate event," she asked flatly. Ryan faltered. The verdict was inevitable. "We're suspending you pending full investigation." Meanwhile, Emily sat in her own office as her supervisor laid out printouts of falsified reports she'd compiled using stolen Helix case studies. "You used proprietary data to pitch clients," her supervisor said. Emily scoffed. "Everyone embellishes their portfolio. Embellishing is not the same as theft." The supervisor slid another sheet forward. "And your live stream with Ryan violated our media policy. Effective immediately, you are on unpaid suspension." For the first time, Emily's confidence cracked. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered. Her supervisor didn't answer. Back in Singapore, the day was bright when Camilla returned to her apartment, the sunset painting gold across the harbor. She set her bag down and opened her laptop to review onboarding documents. The cursor blinked as she typed in her passcode. The moment her desktop loaded, a red notification flashed, "Security alert, unauthorized attempt to access your personnel file. Source Helix Internal Network. Admin level clearance." Camilla froze, not in fear, but focus. Someone inside Helix had tried to access her file. Not a random breach, someone with authority. She opened the metadata. The timestamp lined up not with office hours, but early morning. She traced the IP signature. It was scrubbed clean, too clean. Her mind went instantly analytical. Either someone was investigating her, or someone wanted her information without being seen. She saved the log and encrypted it. She would examine it later. Her phone buzzed. A video call request from Emily. Camilla let it ring until it timed out. Moments later, a message arrived. "Please answer. Everything is falling apart." A second one, "Ryan won't help me. Everyone is blaming me." A third, "Chikong the Bomek M. Huve. You can't." Camilla read the messages in silence. She typed nothing. She owed her nothing. The phone rang again, this time from Ryan. She still didn't answer. The next voicemail came through automatically. Ryan's voice was frayed, frantic. "Camilla, please, I need to explain. Emily, she's saying I pressured her. She's saying I ruined her career. But you know how she gets. You know Camilla stopped listening halfway through." She deleted the voicemail without a hint of regret. Later that evening, as she sat on her balcony, letting the breeze sweep across her shoulders, her phone buzzed again. This time from her best friend, Lyona. Camilla answered. "Are you safe?" Lyona asked immediately. "Yes," Camilla said softly. "I am." "Good," Lyona breathed. "Because things back here are messy. But also someone asked about you." Camilla's spine straightened. "Who? A man I didn't recognize. He asked where you were staying." Camilla's stomach cooled. "Did Emily send him?" she asked. "No." She looked shocked when I mentioned it. This wasn't about her, or Ryan. Camilla gripped the balcony railing more tightly. The city lights blurred. Lyona hesitated. "Cam, this guy knew you'd taken the Singapore job before anyone else did." Camilla closed her eyes. So the watcher wasn't guessing. He was informed, prepared, tracking her moves with precision. "Be careful," Lyona whispered. "I don't like the feeling around this." Camilla nodded. "I will." They hung up. She stayed on the balcony another minute, letting the air settle around her, then walked inside and shut the sliding door. Her apartment felt safe, new, clean, untouched. But beyond that, safety was something else. Someone else. At nearly midnight, a final notification flashed onto her screen. "Unknown device detected near your apartment. Signal strength 82%, location within 30 meters. Camilla stared at the alert. Then she inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She wasn't the woman who ignored danger. She wasn't the woman who accepted betrayal. And she wasn't the woman who bowed under the weight of anyone's expectations. Not anymore. "Whoever you are," she murmured into the darkness, "you're not the one in control." She closed her laptop, locked her balcony door, and stood before the window overlooking the glowing city, its skyscrapers shimmering like new opportunities. Tomorrow she would walk into Helix again as a woman in full command of her life. And if someone was watching, good. Let them see exactly who she was becoming. Camilla arrived at the office early, the city still stretching awake beneath the soft haze of morning. She stepped into the corridor leading toward the security operations room. Her mind, clear and sharp, already aligning itself with the tasks ahead. Yet as she reached her desk and opened her laptop, the first email that blinked across her screen froze her mid-motion. Subject: HR investigation update. Sensitive content attached. She didn't open it. Not yet. She closed her eyes, briefly inhaled, letting the cool, filtered air fill her lungs. She wanted to start her morning from a place of strength, not disruption. But then before she could turn toward her team, another email slid into her inbox, flagged from an unknown sender. "You were right to leave them. Watch what happens next." Her pulse tightened, not with fear but with the cold precision of recognition. Someone was still observing. Someone who understood the consequences beginning to unfold back in Portland. But Camilla clicked away from the inbox. Not now. She had work to do, work she actually wanted, work that valued her. Across the ocean, Ryan was sitting in a gray HR conference room, palms sweating, leg bouncing uncontrollably. A compliance officer tapped a pen against a stack of printed documents. "Let's begin," the officer said. "We've reviewed the live stream from your Aspen retreat." Ryan swallowed hard. The officer pressed play. There he was on screen, laughing with Emily beside a fire pit, glass in hand, revealing details about a high-profile client they were under NDA to protect. "Mr. Hale," the officer continued, "disclosing this information publicly represents a severe breach of confidentiality." Ryan tried to speak, stammering. It wasn't Emily was recording. "And you participated," the officer cut in. "You volunteered information." Ryan rubbed his forehead. "It was just talk. We didn't think that much is clear." The officer pushed papers toward him. "For now, you are suspended pending a full investigation." Ryan stared down at the signature line, hands trembling. His entire chest felt too tight, too hot. Everything he'd hoped to hide was sliding into the open. In another part of the city, Emily sat rigidly across from her PR agency supervisor as printed screenshots spilled across the table, falsified reports, copied system analyses, and internal Helix slides she'd never been authorized to use. "You misrepresented proprietary information," her supervisor said, voice clipped. "These slides